Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a video on all the books I've ever given 5 stars. So on my Goodreads I have a shelf called 5-star books. It's got 24 books on it, so we have 24 5-star reads out of all the books I've read since I started properly reading again in 2021. I used to read quite a lot when I was younger, but then I kind of trailed off and started only reading really on holiday. So this is just going to be my 5-star reads that I've logged on Goodreads, and I started logging on Goodreads in 2021 when I started properly getting back into reading like every day. I've got 24 here, it's quite a few to get through. It's going to be quite quick fire, it's not going to be like in depth on each book. I'm just going to give you the book, the general plot and my quick thoughts, because you already know that I obviously loved it. And we've got to get through 24 books, so let's get into this. I'm going to go in order from the first book that I rated 5 stars to the most recent. A lot of these books I did read on my Kindle. Some of them I now got physical copies of, but some of them I never got physical copies of, so you'll just have to bear with me. The first book that I have that I don't actually have the physical copy of is The Flat Share by Beth O'Leary. Oh, you can... that's also been opened sometimes. Is The Flat Share by Beth O'Leary, and this book is basically about Tiffy and Leon. So Tiffy is looking for a place to stay. She broke up with her ex-boyfriend and she needs a place to live, but she doesn't have the funds to get a place by herself, and so she moves in with Leon. But basically Tiffy works day shifts and Leon works night shifts. They share this flat that they live in, but they never actually see each other because they're like passing ships, and eventually they start leaving notes for each other, you know, like little reminders, and they turn into letters and they start writing to each other before they actually meet each other. And it's just a very cute book. It was the first book I read when I got back into reading again, and it was a 5-star. And I think it will always be a 5-star because it's just like, I was like, I'm gonna try to get back into reading. I picked up this book and it sold me to get back into reading. I was like, okay, yeah, this was the right decision. Next book is You and Me on Vacation, or People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. This one is my first Emily Henry book. I read it on the 20th of June 2021. That was when I was introduced into the Hen universe. So this one follows Poppy and Alex, who go on holiday every year together, and 2 summers ago something happens which causes them to fall out and stop talking, and then they decide to give it one last go and go on one last summer holiday together. This was literally the second book I'd read after The Flat Share, so this was 2 books into my book journey, both 5 stars, so they were great ways to start off, and I still stand by them being 5 stars. So I've reread both of these and they do still stand up as 5 stars even as my taste has developed. Next 5-star I have is Beach Read by Emily Henry. Talked about this so many times on my channel, but we have January and Gus. January moves in next door to Gus. They're both writers, they're both suffering from writer's block, and they decide to swap genres, and they decide to swap genres with each other. And that is what this book is about. I've spoken about it so many times. Everyone knows it's 5-star. I've reread it 4 times. It will always be a 5-star. Best Emily Henry book, best rom-com, best book of all time. Next book I gave 5 stars was The Bride's Test, which is such a throwback. I remember distinctly reading this book. It's the second book in the Kiss Quotient series. Again, I just read this on my Kindle, I don't have it with me. I never reread it, I don't know if it still stands up as a 5-star. Some of these books that I will tell you, like, if I'm not sure if it would still stand up as a 5-star. And I feel like maybe this one wouldn't because I really can't remember much about it. One of the characters in each of the books, I think there's 3 books, maybe 4, I can't remember. But one of the characters in each of the books with autism, and that is a big part of the plot of the story. So I think it is the male main character in this one. The books definitely handle autism very well, in my opinion, as someone who does not have autism or is not diagnosed with autism. And I think what happens is his mum finds this girl for him because his mum wants him to like fall in love, and his mum finds this girl for him. She moves in with him. It's like forced proximity, and he's obviously really grumpy with her. He's like, I don't want to date someone that my mum's chosen for me. They kind of work through some of his barriers and he eventually warms up to her, and it's just a cute story of them kind of growing together. Next 5-star I have, also don't have the book for this one, is Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. I love this book. I really want to reread it, and I think it would still stand up as a 5-star. But basically Love in Other Words is about these childhood best friends. They turn to lovers, but then something happens to break them apart, and then they meet again in the future and they're kind of work out their issues and work out what happened in their childhood and kind of forgive each other. I gave that one 5 stars. Next one is You Deserve Each Other by Sarah Hogle. I do not hear enough about this book. This book is amazing. If you have not read it, please read it. It's basically about this couple who are engaged, and they kind of fall out of love with each other. There's not that spark in the relationship anymore, and they both are irritating each other, and so they don't want to be the one to call off the wedding, so they both kind of start doing things to annoy the other person to get the other person to call off the wedding. And whilst they're like scheming and all of this, you kind of see them fall back in love again, and it's really, really sweet. One, also don't have a physical copy of. This is another Beth O'Leary book, and it is The Road Trip by Beth O'Leary. I haven't reread this one. I don't know if it stand up as 5 stars. I think it would, personally, from what I can remember about it, but basically the story is about Addie and her sister. They're on their way to this wedding. They have this whole road trip planned out, but they run into the back of another car, I believe, and that car ends up being the car of Addie's ex-boyfriend, and it kind of flashes back to them when they were together in their relationship, and then the present time is them kind of figuring out where the relationship went wrong, and it's a bit of a second chance romance, and I really, really enjoyed it. Next one I do have the physical copy for, that is Book Lovers, again, Emily Henry. All Emily Henry's books are 5 stars, so they're all in this video somewhere, but I'm going in chronological order. So this one is Book Lovers, which follows Charlie and Nora. Nora is a literary agent, Charlie is a book editor, and they have this encounter a couple years ago, and they don't get off to the best start. It's like a business encounter, and they don't really like each other, and then Nora and her sister go on a little escape to this small town, and who ends up being there? Charlie Lastra. So it's basically them stuck in this small town together. It's a bit of a small town romance, but they're not actually small town people, so it's a bit different to a small town romance, because it's a small town romance, but they are both quite city people, basically want to be back in New York. Next one is also by Beth O'Leary. I really went on a Beth O'Leary binge. This one is The No Show by Beth O'Leary. Now this one is a little bit more controversial, I think. A lot of people don't rate this one 5 stars because the first part of the book is kind of like, it's the reason why I really rate this a 5 stars is because it's unlike any book I've ever read. The first part of it, it's like this man is cheating on all these different women. He's dating all these different women at the same time. You're kind of trying to figure out how these timelines match up, but it's like he's dating all these women at the same time, and you're trying to figure out how this book is going to end, like what's going to happen, because he's dating all these women at the same time. Like, how can you root for any of them? And it follows all his dates with all these different women. I think he has one which is like his best friend, he has one which is his girlfriend, one which is just like a hookup, and it's him dating these 3 different women at the same time, and you're trying to figure out what's happening, really. And it's unlike any romance I've ever read in my life. Next I read Normal People by Sally Rooney. This isn't the Normal People book, this is the scripts, but I don't have the book. I watched the TV show first, and I do prefer the TV show to the book, but I still love the book. It's just, I understand people being put off by the lack of speech marks. Personally, I went through and added all the speech marks myself in my physical copy of the book, which I gave to my boyfriend. That did kind of annoy me because I feel like it's harder to read and takes me longer to read, because I will read something and I don't realise it's text, it's speech, and then I'll go back and I'll be like, oh, that was speech, now I'm confused. But other than that, I really, really did enjoy the book. It basically follows Marianne and Connell, who meet when they're in high school, and they start dating, but Connell is this popular guy, Marianne's not very popular, and so they kind of hide their relationship. Eventually they end up breaking up, and it's basically them throughout their lives constantly coming back to each other. Like, they go and date other people, but they're constantly going back to each other, and they just can't get away from each other, really. And just love this TV show. I love this book. Next I read Ghosted by J.M. Darhauer. Don't know how that's how you pronounce it. It basically follows a couple who start dating when they were younger. They have a child together, but she is now a single mother because they broke up, and he is this famous, like, think Marvel, he's like one of the superheroes in Marvel. So he's this big famous actor, and it's basically about the dad trying to make amends with his daughter, his ex, and it's just a really sweet story. It does deal a lot with addiction, so if that is something that would be triggering for you, I'm just gonna warn that now because it's a big part of the book. Next I read Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. Again, I don't have the physical copy, but this book is basically a thriller which follows this couple who go to the Scottish Highlands on this getaway because their marriage is struggling, and when they're there, creepy things start happening. And then there's also every few chapters or every other chapter there is a letter that the wife has wrote to her husband every single year on their anniversary, and you're basically trying to figure out how they got from this happy couple to being where they are now. And it's just really good, and it's quite tense and it keeps you on the edge of your seat. It's one of those books I just recommend to all people. I think everyone would like it. Next I read Daisy Jones and the Six, and this is the only Taylor Jenkins Reid book that I've given 5 stars. I think the rest of them have been 4, 4.5. I love all her books, but this one is a 5-star for me. It's basically about this band who isn't actually real. If you don't know that Taylor Jenkins celebrity world books, they all follow these celebrities who you kind of made to feel they're real. It follows their life and it's made to feel like they're real. Some of them you can tell they're kind of based on certain real life celebrities, but you're kind of made to believe that they're real, but they're not actually real. And this one follows a band and it's kind of told in interview style. It's like this band years on is being interviewed about their time in this band, and each of the members being interviewed about their time in this band, and it's just really interesting and fun to see their dynamics with each other. And it's a really, really well thought out book and I really loved it. And I think it's got a TV show. I don't think the TV show is anywhere near as good as the book, but I don't think it's terrible either. The music that came out of that TV show still goes up. It's a great book, and you can tell a lot of thought went into that. Next book I have given 5 stars is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. This book follows Pip, who does an EPQ during her A-levels, which is, if you don't know, it's like a little project you can do when you're in college, which is when you're between 16 and 18 in the UK. It's a little project you can do to kind of get extra credit, and all you've got to do is make a presentation about a certain subject of your choice. And Pip decides that she's going to make her EPQ about a murder that happened in the village. So a school girl was murdered called Andy Bell, and people all assumed it was her boyfriend called South Singh, but he never got the chance to defend himself or say anything about it because he was found dead, and that was why he was presumed to have killed her, because he was presumed to have killed himself from the guilt of killing her. But Pip does a project on this murder and she kind of figures out that she doesn't actually think that it was South Singh that did it, and so she teams up with South Singh's brother and they kind of try and figure out who actually killed Andy Bell. Great mystery book, and there's 3 books in it and I love all of them. Next I read Happy Place by Emily Henry. Last Emily Henry book in this video because Funny Story isn't out yet, but I'm sure that will be 5 stars. So this book follows Harriet and Wynne, who are in this friendship group who go on a summer trip every summer, but they end up breaking up, and because it might be the last summer trip, they decide to fake date for the rest of the trip so that it doesn't ruin the trip for everyone else. There's a bit of a second chance romance. Again, it's an Emily Henry book, of course it's 5 stars, don't need to say anything else. Next 5 stars, this is one of my 6-star reads. This is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. So this book basically follows Celia and Marco, so a part of this travelling circus, which is called No, I'm not going to try to pronounce that. It's part of this travelling circus which just pops up in random places. It's this exclusive circus, everyone wants to go see it. They are part of this circus and it's kind of magical. No one thinks magic exists, so everyone just thinks, they're just clever, but the circus is a little bit magical. And basically these 2 men at the start, they make this deal that they will find 2 people, get them to train so that they can duel to the death, and then obviously one of them will win. Celia and Marco are basically trained throughout their lives in this circus to duel each other to the death, but they fall in love. And that is basically the premise of the story, and I really enjoyed it. I really did not think I was going to enjoy it. I honestly just bought it for the cover because the cover is so pretty, but I didn't actually think I was going to enjoy it, but I really, really did. Next is As Good as Dead, which is the 3rd book in the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. I can't say much because it's the 3rd book. It's another great book. It's another great mystery. It made me cry at the end. It is a great final book. Holly Jackson knows how to pull at your heartstrings, and I'm not going to say anything else because I don't really know what to say without giving something away. Next I read Ignite Me, which is in the Shat Me series. I have the Shat Me book there, but I don't have Ignite Me yet because it's not out in the collector's edition yet, and I read them all on my Kindle. Ignite Me is the third Shatter Me book, not including the novellas, and Shatter Me basically follows this girl called Juliet who has powers where if she touches someone they die, and so she is locked up and eventually she's let out by the government because they want her to be a weapon for them, and she kind of fights back because she doesn't want to be a weapon. Again, I'm not going to say too much, especially not about the third book because I don't want to spoil anything, but the third book is widely renowned as the best one in the series. It's got the most romance. I definitely think it is the best one. I think it's the only one I gave 5 stars in the series, but overall I say it's like a 4.5 series. I would recommend. And next, the next two books that I rated 5 stars were Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. Again, I'm not going to hold these up because they make my lighting go weird. So I've talked about them many times on this channel. Fourth Wing is basically following a war college where there's different quadrants. Scribe quadrant, there's the Riders quadrant, and there's 2 other quadrants which can't remember the names of. No. Violet is supposed to go into the Scribe quadrant to follow in her father's footsteps, but then her father dies and her mum wants her to follow in her footsteps, and she was in the Riders quadrant. So Violet gets put in the Riders quadrant and basically follows her trying to get around these trials using her brains and her wits because she's not actually strong enough to get through these trials compared to the other people that have been training their whole lives to be a rider, because she's been training her whole life to be a scribe. And there's a strong romance plot in this one. Iron Flame is kind of a completely different plot to the first one, but I'm not going to say anything about that because it will spoil it. But yeah, these are quite thick books. I've heard people not liking Iron Flame because of how thick it is. They don't think it needed to be that long. Granted, it took me about 2 weeks to read, but I never wanted it to end. I absolutely loved it. The next book I read and rated 5 stars, it was Powerless by Lauren Roberts. Probably, I heard everything about this book. It's another very, very popular book. But basically, this one follows Payton, who is an ordinary in this society where ordinaries have been banished, killed off, because the king wants there to only be elites who are people with powers, and ordinary people who don't have powers are not allowed in this kingdom anymore. And so Payton is trying to hide that she's an ordinary. She lives on the streets because she doesn't have like the most exceptional power. I mean, she doesn't have a power at all, but the one that she pretends to have is that she's a psychic, where she basically just uses her brain and figures out like little things, little clues on people to kind of predict what has happened, and people believe that she's used her powers to do that. Really, she's an ordinary and she's just trained herself. And then one day she saves the prince, gets invited to participate in a trial between a load of elites. It's kind of like the Hunger Games. She partakes in this with all the other elites, but she doesn't actually have a power. Next book I gave 5 stars was Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. So this book follows Iris and Roman, and basically in this book we focus more on the romance than the fantasy, but there is 2 gods in this book who are at war with each other, and they are kind of enlisting people to fight for them, and it's kind of like a world war going on, but it's a fantasy, so it's between these 2 gods instead of an actual world war. Iris's brother gets enlisted to go fight in this war, and Iris is writing letters to her brother on this typewriter, and she believes that they're going to her brother, but really the typewriter is magical and it's going to Roman, who has the other magical typewriter. And they are basically writing letters back and forth. Roman knows it's Iris, they work together at this newspaper, but Iris does not know it's Roman. Yeah, it doesn't say anything else, so I'm not going to say anything else, but it's just a really sweet romance. It's one of those romances, like, it just feels like poetic, lyrical, magical. If you like that sort of romance rather than like just pure like lust for each other, it's more like an actual like magical romantic romance. So the next one is A Court of Wings and Ruin, which is the 3rd book in the ACOTAR series. It's the only one in the ACOTAR series that I gave 5 stars, but I would say that the ACOTAR series overall is a 5 star. For this series we kind of follow Feyre, who is a human. She has a very poor family, and so she goes out and hunts for her family, and one day she ends up shooting a Fae, who are the magical people in this series. She shoots a Fae and she gets taken back to the Feylands by Tamlin, who is a high Fae and made to live in his castle thing with his court. And I'm not going to say what happens after that first book because it's when it gets good, and I'm not going to spoil it, but this one follows more of the war aspect of it. Obviously it's Aka War, it was a big chunk of the war aspect of it, so I really liked that in this book. It had a lot of action in it, but it also had a lot of romance, and it just had basically everything you could ever want in a fantasy book. I thought this one was definitely the best in the series for me. The final book that I gave 5 stars is Caraval by Stephanie Garber. Follows Scarlett and her sister Donatella. They both really want to participate in Caraval, which is an event that happens once a year, and basically you have to follow all these clues, and then if you win you get granted a wish. So Scarlett and Donatella have waited their whole lives to kind of be invited to this, and eventually they get invited, but when they get there, Donatella, she disappears, and so Scarlett really wants to win, and she does this whole game with this guy called Julian, so she really wants to win so she can wish for her sister back. And there's also a very sweet romance in this. I really enjoyed the magical element of this. I thought that it was really fun the way you didn't know what was real and what wasn't. That is every book I've ever given 5 stars. I will make an updated video on this at some point with more books I give 5 stars, but up until now this is every single book I've given 5 stars. I love all of them. I would recommend all of them, obviously, and let me know if you've read any of them in the comments. Let me know what you thought of them. Let me know your top 5-star reads. Please follow my Instagram and my TikTok, which is @_libraryofeden. Subscribe down below, give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed. See you next time in my next video. Bye!